We all know that the sport of football is one of the sports that take a toll on your body, which is why we see a lot of football players turn to professional wrestling, such as Mojo Rawley, King Corbin, Brian Pillman, Roman Reigns, and Goldberg, to name a few. Today's story is about the only wrestler to have a successful wrestling career while still playing football in the AFL, the Big Cat Ernie Ladd. I'm Camilio Salamander for WBPTV, and this is Beyond Kayfabe. With that being said, let's cue that intro. Born Ernest Lawrence Ladd on November 28, 1938 in Rayville, Louisiana. He was raised by his mother Louetta and stepfather James Ford. His family would move to Orange, Texas, and he would play basketball and football. He would become an instant star. Ernie, he attended Wallace High School, and here he would grow to become a 6'9", 290-pound demigod. Ernie was coached by the legendary Willie Ray Smith Sr. Ernie, he was a force on the basketball court as well. So well that his basketball skill earned him a scholarship to Grambling State University in 1957. With Ernie being so tall and big, he would be able just to walk on the football field and dominate that sport as well. He quickly established himself as a star of the football team as he played defensive tackle. With him being so big and strong, he had no problems overpowering everyone that he faced. He simply owned the football field. In 1961, Ernie, he would enter the AFL and the NFL draft. He would be drafted 119th to the San Diego Chargers, that's associated with the AFL, and 48th to the Chicago Bears, that's associated with the NFL. Ernie, he decided to play for the AFL instead of the NFL. He instantly became one of the league elite players, and he was the biggest and strongest man in pro football during this era. In 1961, Ernie, he made his professional wrestling debut. At first, it was a publicity stunt, but let me tell you, Ernie, he was a freak of nature, standing 6'9", 290 pounds, chest size 52 inches, along with 20-inch biceps. Man. Along with this, he was trained by the great Bobo Brazil. He would wrestle part-time during the AFL off-seasons. He became a huge draw as the fans loved to see him in the ring. In 1963, Ernie, along with the San Diego Chargers, they would win the AFL championship. Here in the AFL, Ernie played in 4 AFL championship games, winning 1. He is also a 4-time AFL All-Star. Ernie, he was a beast on the field and in the square circle. But most importantly, Ernie, he had standards and he wouldn't put up with no. He also fought against Jim Crow in New Orleans during the 1965 All-Star game, where Ernie helped organize a walkout when the black football players had to deal with racism when they arrived to the city. Ernie had a great career with the Chargers, but he wasn't seeing eye to eye with the front office. In 1965, Ernie was suspended indefinitely by the GM and coach Sid Gilman. Along with Ernie, the Chargers would trade Fajan to the Houston Oilers. And according to the commissioner Joe Foss, Houston owner Bud Adams had tampered with the trade dealings. Ernie, since he wasn't seeing eye to eye with the front office, he had refused to go back to San Diego and suggested that he was going to turn to pro wrestling full time. Eventually, Ernie signed to Houston and he played during the 1966 season. That next year, he was signed to the Kansas City Chiefs. Here is where Kansas had put together the amazing defensive tackle duo of Ernie and Buck Buchanan. At the age of 28, Ernie, he will step away from the game of football and turn to pro wrestling full time. Now Ernie, he will explain why he really stepped away from the game of football, saying,
After a few years, I was making so much money wrestling in the off season that I figured I could make a lot more by giving up football and wrestling full time. I quit football at 28 and still had several good years left. That first year of wrestling, I made $98,000. And after that, I never made anything less than $100,000 a year. That was big money back in the 60s.
From the years of 1961 to 1969, Ernie had enjoyed his time as a babyface. But during the 70s, Ernie, he wanted a change. He would change his character from a loving babyface to a heel. Actually, he became one of the wrestling's most hated heels across all platforms. And a fun fact, Ernie, he was the first black wrestler to properly portray a heel. Now, he was known to get the crowd worked up with his arrogant and colorful demeanor during his promos, especially when he would give his opponent nicknames like the Drunken Indian for Wahoo McDaniel and the Mad Vermin for Mr. Wrestling himself. So to get real heat from the crowd, Ernie, he would take a count out loss as he would just plainly walk out of the arena. This act would be known as pulling an Ernie lag. Now Ernie, he wrestled for different promotions like the NWA territories, Mid-South, NWF, WWC, and the WWF, now known as the WWE. In the WWF, Ernie, he was managed by the Grand Wizard of Wrestling, and one of his most memorable feuds was with Andre the Giant. He would call Andre names like Andre the Dummy and the Big Fat French Fry during his promos. One thing people may not know is that Ernie was actually the 5th person to body slam Andre the Giant back in 1978. That was 9 years before Hulk Hogan, who is currently being known as the first man to body slam Andre the Giant. In certain areas where he wrestled, he would be known as the King, and he would also wear a crown to fit that moniker. But the name that would stick to him was the Big Cat. In 1976, Ernie, he would pick up a huge win against Mr. Universe Maynard. He would earn himself a WWF Championship match on March 1st, 1976 at Madison Square Garden against Bruno Sammartino. During the early 80s, Ernie, he had left the WWF and started wrestling for Mid-South Wrestling for Booker Bill Watts. In Mid-South, Ernie, he would feud with Paul Orndorff, Ray Candy, and the Junkyard Dog. Ernie, he would say that Bill Watts played a huge role in why the Junkyard Dog got so popular. For more information on the Junkyard Dog, go ahead and check out his episode of Beyond Kayfabe. Ernie would have a good run in the tag division alongside Bad Leroy Brown. Also, he would serve as the manager of the Wild Samoans. 1986, Ernie, he would retire from wrestling. He would also try his hand at commentary, calling matches with Gorilla Monsoon and Johnny Violent. He made his commentary debut calling the 20-man Battle Royal match at WrestleMania 2. Ernie, he would quietly leave the WWF with Bobby Heenan replacing him on the commentary desk. 1994, Ernie got inducted into the WCW Hall of Fame, and that next year, he would be inducted into the WWF Hall of Fame. This had made him the first wrestler to be inducted in both the WCW and WWF Hall of Fame. Now, it's time to get personal. Ernie, he would get married to Rosalind Marie Holmes on June 30th, 1962. They had 4 kids together, and they was married for 45 years before his death. Now, Ernie, he is a close family friend of the Bush family, and he supported George Bush's 2000 presidential campaign. He was also his kid's basketball coach in Franklin, Louisiana. And Ernie also owned his own restaurant in New Orleans before Hurricane Katrina called Big Cat Ernie Ladd Throwdown Barbecue. In 2004, Ernie, he was diagnosed with colon cancer, and the doctors had gave him 6 months to live. But with Ernie being strong mentally and physically, he was able to fight past the due dates the doctors gave him, and he lived for 3 more years. On March 10th, 2007, Ernie, he will pass away at the age of 68. Ernie Ladd should be remembered for his athleticism. For him to go to college for basketball and just walk onto the football field and dominate that sport the way he did, then just to move on to professional wrestling and become a great star at that as well, man, Ernie Ladd, he was just a freak of nature. Thanks to all my subscribers for watching, and those that's not a subscriber, thank you as well. If you like what you see and would like to see more, check out a few more videos. And until then, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.